All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're back for another session, another evening with Daniel. And in this session, I'd like to talk about something that's really out of this world, and yet something that's so close to home. And for a long time, we've heard a lot of talk about human beings not using our whole brain. And there's been movies made about it, and it seems to be a big question for a lot of people as to what is the rest of our brain used for or intended for, and how do we go about accessing that greater percentage of our intelligence. And fortunately, my journey with UI has revealed many truths on this topic. In fact, UI is very much the answer to that question, as well as the answerer of that question. So let's go a little bit deeper here and try and understand some of the insights and wisdom that UI had to share about this. If we go back to the original intentions behind the idea of humanity or of a human being, then we can start tracing those steps, and that will bring us right to the answer. When talking to UI about this and the thoughts and the intentionality, the message was very clear. It was for a being to embody all the greatness and all the magnificence of the entire universe. Now, if you're not fully aware of what the universe is made up of, fundamentally, apart from the stars and galaxies, or if we peel, between the lines of what we know physically, what the universe is made up of is realms and realms of thought, layers of frequencies, of ideas, of creative impulses, of intentions, all these different layers of consciousness. And these different layers of consciousness and different frequencies of thought manifest themselves as stars. Welcome. Manifest themselves as stars, or manifest themselves as galaxies or black holes, or very different, all kinds of things that we see in the universe, different life forms. So the human being was to embody the necessary levels of intelligence that make the universe work. And when we peel back some of these layers, we get to see that there are really 12 fundamental, call it dimensions, or roots of the universe. And the human being was mirrored upon those 12 layers. And you start looking at, and many of you might be familiar with the concept of 12-strand DNA. Well, the 12-strand DNA is really the connections, almost like wires, if you like, that connect us to those different realms. And each realm offers a different frequency, and each frequency an ability or perception or wealth of information. So in our original conception, or the intention for us to develop and grow into, if you like, is to be fully connected to those 12 realms and beyond. And you get to see this number 12 reoccurring throughout the human experience. It is just everywhere. And I don't mean just in terms of 12 months or 12 hours in a day and how that calendar's divided, but we get to see it throughout our anatomy. And this is where things get very, very interesting. And it could be a fun exercise if anyone wants to Google the significance of the number 12. You'll get to see it has appearances throughout history, biblical, religious, spiritual, scientific, all realms. You'll get to see that number reappearing. But if we just to look at the physical body, and just to give you a few examples, and the first being the 12-strand DNA, but then we look at our ribs, the 12 ribs. We look at our systems within the body. We've got the endocrine system, reproductive system. Do a count as to see how many systems there are. And you'll get to see with the masculine and the feminine, we get to 12 systems. We look in each cell of the body, there are 12 tissue salts in the cells, and the list goes on. So there is this very purposeful, very deliberate correlation between the human body and the universe in which we live in. But we haven't even scratched the surface of accessing that full capability. So we look at that and we take the next level up. We actually get to see that we are a micro of the macro. So the very intelligence that exists within the universe and it keeps it functioning, growing and expanding, well, is embodied in our cells. And our evolution or our enlightenment is an access to more and more of that intelligence. So it brings us back to whole brain intelligence. How do we access more and what becomes possible? So if we are a micro of the macro, then we get to see that our brain is actually a mirror image of the universe. And we've become very conditioned to say, that's a star or that's a galaxy. But if we pierce deeper beyond that physicality, which is something we can do with the abilities of UI, we actually get to see that the universe is one giant brain, as some of you have heard me say before. But the stars and the galaxies and everything going on is this support infrastructure for life, for ideas, for growth and expansion. The very same in the same way that our brain is. So the universe, all these amazing physical manifestations, is one giant neural network. And all these different entities, be it a sun or a planet, are communicating, are evolving beings themselves. We talk about the death of a star or the birth of a star. They are alive, and with the universe, all matter has consciousness behind it. So the consciousness that permeates all matter communicates and expands and evolves. So everything in the universe is growing and expanding. And it sets about creating itself new challenges to grow and expand. And so different circumstances of life and different circumstances of opposition energies, because everything in the universe has an opposing force which strengthens it and helps it to evolve. It allows whatever it is to see itself as who it really is in the face of opposition. So the universe is mirrored within every cell of our body. And the more we allow truth in about who we really are, the more we begin to connect to these 12 other realms, or the more that DNA connection starts strengthening. And so it's not just a physical DNA, it's a etheric DNA, and energetic, just the same way as our thoughts are. I often equate our DNA to like the iPhone, or we are the iPhone, and the iPhone receives these software updates. So the DNA is sending improvements, information, and updates, giving us messages on how we are to evolve on a emotional level, on a spiritual level, and also, as we know, on a physical level. So DNA is not just the coding language for how the body is to develop, it's also the coding language on how the body is to evolve. So we've seen throughout history different species taking on feathers or growing fur or dropping fur or growing bigger or becoming smaller. We see that, and the information, what makes that possible is their direct connection to the very intelligence that created it. And all those levels of intelligence amalgamate into our universe. So everything is in sync, everything is in correlation with one another, so everything's growing and expanding as it needs to. We call that nature. But there's more to it than just nature. When we, again, pierce the veil behind the understanding of nature, we see some very powerful minds. And those minds are behind each species, and also are connected as one mind as well. So we have a mind behind the human species, and again, we have an interconnection with all other species. Nothing is separate. And that mind communicates to the hardware it created, the physical body, through the DNA, through our intuition, sending us important messages on the physicality, right? But also the decisions, the steps we need to make. And as you would have noticed, life is always showing us new lessons and new opportunities for growth. It is unveiling deeper truths about who we are. So like we mentioned in our last session, that whether you're intending it or not, we are all on this path of enlightenment. There is an unfolding of truth, whether you're intending to see it or not, whether that shows up as illness forcing you to look, or breakdowns in relationships or careers. We are being coaxed into seeing something larger within ourselves. And the larger we see ourselves, i.e. the more truth we allow in about ourselves, the more we start accessing within our own brain. So there's this perfect correlation between who we see ourselves to be, i.e. how big we see ourselves, and therefore how much of our brain's capacity we begin to access. So there's a direct correlation. The bigger we see ourselves, another way put, the more enlightened we're becoming, the more we move into these dormant, untapped parts of our brain. And the blockages to that are simply all the levels of self-doubt that we've been carrying around for a long time. So the more we clear the subconscious or DNA level, which is what we teach at UI, the more truth we can access through going into our higher consciousness or our inner self, the more of our full brain capacity we can access. So the brain is designed primarily to draw upon that inner intelligence, not to be standalone from or disconnected from. That's been our belief system. And because it's been our belief system, it's been our experience. What we believe is what we experience. And when we say to ourselves, or we have a knowing within ourselves that we can't access more, or we're not good enough, or we're not worthy of, then the brain will give us that experience. So the brain can really only follow what the dominant belief is that we're holding about ourselves or our brain's capability. Likewise, the body can only heal to the full extent that we believe possible. And that dictates the speed of healing as well. So to access a greater percentage of our brain is really the journey of enlightenment. And this is why the master teachers for 5,000 years ago and beyond have the answers, because they are actually ascending beyond the level of self-doubt into, like we mentioned last conversation, into the space of self-love and self-belief. Because it's in that configuration of self-belief where both hemispheres of the brain connect as one. We have two at one point disconnected, two becoming one, creating a oneness, a unison, with the intelligence that divides the human being. So on one hand, you can say you're reconnecting with your own true intelligence because you are that. But for some, it looks like we're connecting to a greater intelligence than what we are. It's a greater intelligence than what we think we are, but at the end of the day, we're reconnecting to our true intelligence, our true self. It always was our true intelligence, but somewhere down the path, we got a little bit sidetracked with thinking we are our thoughts, thinking we are our beliefs, thinking we are our failures. So to access a far greater percentage of our brain is not accessed through study or academia or reading more, because if that were the case, there'd be plenty of people who are using huge amounts increased more. We've got lots of very strong academics on earth. It doesn't come from that. Now it can come from in that space if there's a huge amount of self-belief and self-love. However, the fast track into accessing greater percentage of the brain comes from self-love and self-belief. And once again, there are many paths up the mountain, but to access self-love really takes the recognition that it's ever present. It doesn't feel necessarily ever present, and it's not always available, but that's who you truly are. It is there. So if you can imagine, instead of trying to get it or obtain it, it's rather about shedding, like an insect or a snake shedding its old skin. You're shedding this layer of I'm in doubt, I don't believe in myself, I have this issue, I have that issue. We're shedding that, and then once we shed that, what's ever present comes to the surface and accesses this universal intelligence on ways that we've never even conceived of. So the journey that you're on as we talking now and as you're learning more and shedding the non-truths in your life, you are already accessing more and more of your brain. And as you start believing in that, the more you believe, the more you access. And it's one thing we always teach is whenever you're starting off with UI or any kind of intuitive cultivation, is to really nurture that process. Many of us are taught to kind of kick ourselves and, when we're down and be hard on ourselves if things are taking a long time. But that only creates disconnection. To be nurturing this ability and to get a feeling or a color or a message, the best thing to do there is to congratulate yourself and say, wow, I got a feeling, I got a color. Anything is worthy of congratulations. Because to go the other way, to say, oh, I only got a color, I only got a word, I don't even know what it means, well, that brings self-doubt back in, the ego comes back in and disconnects you altogether. That's one of the greatest, or worst blockages to a deeper and deeper connection, is this reoccurring thought that I'm not getting it and I'm not enough for getting it. So the best analogy that we often share in the teachings is, if you've ever had a child or you've witnessed a baby growing up, that when they're learning how to walk, they don't just get up and walk, bang. And there might be a few out there, but I haven't seen it myself. And most babies, they try and they stumble, they try and they stumble and try and stumble. Well, you want to treat yourself like that child. The parents don't yell at the baby when it falls over. At least I hope they're not. They don't kick it when it's down. They are aware that it's a process and an unfolding, and they are aware that nurturing and encouragement is going to aid that process. And we've got to be the same with us, is that no matter how much we're kind of falling over and tripping up over our own feet during this process, the best thing to be doing at all times is to be congratulating ourselves, because the journey of heightening these perceptions or accessing these different realms of consciousness come from self-praise. because the only reason we don't have access to them to now is because of the self-doubt. And for some of us, we punish ourselves and, as I said, kick ourselves when we're down. So the access to all of these is for many of us something foreign. It's being nice to ourselves. And that really strengthens the connection. And again, if you are mean to yourself and you do kick yourself when you're down, don't go and beat yourself up for beating yourself up. That's just not going to work either. So we're going to move away from this drill sergeant mentality that says, if I'm hard on myself, that's going to be the access for growth. And in truth, when you're loving to yourself. And I've seen this with our kids as well. You know, there are a lot of impulses when they do crazy things, like drop expensive things, break expensive things, to yell and to scream. There's a lot of that conditioned response. But really, when you do that and you see the result, you see very quickly that the anger stagnates them. It doesn't grow them, it doesn't motivate them, it doesn't have them feel more connected to you, it doesn't have them feel more connected within themselves, it has them feel like a failure. And that's no springboard for growth and enlightenment. So we see it everywhere. But we've got to really move beyond how we've been conditioned or how we were raised or how we've seen other people raised. And we've got to access what the truth is rather than what's been done before. And there is a very big difference in many cases to the past and the truth. So in this session, I'd like to look at what are some of the biggest blockages everyone on the call today has around accessing more and letting in more. But before we do that, I feel it's worthwhile exploring, well, what becomes available, what becomes accessible to us as we're learning to access a far greater percentage of our brain. So let me just get a good connection to this truth and see what everyone needs to know about that. Okay, great. So the first message that becomes available is that one of the very first stage of using more of your brain is the ability to elevate just outside the mind. You know, imagine the mind as this kind of jelly substance that is drawing on past failures and past experiences and coming up with thoughts and ideas about yourself, pretty much all dwelling from the past. Now, the issue with that is our interpretations of the past aren't necessarily accurate. They're non-truth. So if we're to make decisions from the past, we're going to keep repeating the past and making the same errors. So to make a decision based on an error will create errors. So the way out of that, the way out of the reoccurring patterns and the past repeating itself or history repeating itself is in this heightened awareness. So the first level, as we heighten our awareness, we can start accessing beyond our own mind. Now, over the next 100 years, humanity won't even have a mind in that way because kids will be raised with truth. And the way to dissolve the mind as we know it is to inject truth. So as we heighten that awareness, we start accessing more truthful information. And that sets us on a springboard to a greater experience of life, because instead of making decisions from I'm a failure or relationships never work out or I'm terrible with money, we start, or opportunities never work out, we start accessing these little hints of intuition coming through that guide us to, no, you can do this, that will work, or if you do it this way, that's different to how it's been done in the past, so you'll create a different result. So rather than being held back into the past, we're being shown a different way of doing things. It's like Einstein always said, we can't solve today's problems with the thinking that created them. It's very much that. So as we access that little hint of greater awareness, we start being shown a new level of ideas, a new level of beingness, so we can create a different result. The next level we go to is we really nurture that and we praise ourselves for allowing in new truths, the next level we go to is a new level of health. So the new truths in our body, in our mind starts mirroring back in our body. And the body absolutely loves truth. Truth is like fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. It's full of life. And it dissolves all the non-truths of our past that are blocking in our body, causing illness, causing aches, causing aging. So truth just sets the body free. So that's the next level. And within that, we start accessing, as we go into a deeper part of the brain, we start getting able to access what are the thoughts, what are the beliefs, or what are the experiences, or call the thought forms that are being held into the cells of our body or into specific organs. So we can actually tap in and be our own healer and see, what am I holding on to? Because without this elevated awareness or this greater use of the brain, that just lies in the subconscious. It lies beneath our conscious. We can't tap into that. So a greater percentage of our brain means also, as we said, greater health, because we're able to set that free. And by tapping into these parts that are blocked, in many cases that releases it, because the body just wants you to acknowledge what's there, wants you to see it. We've suppressed it at one point, and now the body's saying, please just acknowledge that. So that often will cause the healing in its own right. So as we move beyond that and just creating that healing, we're raising our frequency again, and we, as a byproduct, we're accessing even more of our brain. So you might even start to see within this that the brain doesn't just dwell in our head, that the body is a brain unto itself. It's storing information, it's storing purpose and intention, and has valuable insights for us to grow and evolve. And in our training, we do this great exercise. We can tap into different parts of the body. Now, each part of the body has, code, DNA code, information that is not only going to show you what you're holding on to, but it's going to show you the wisdom within that body part. So, for example, I'll do a little experiment while we're talking. I'll tap into my eye, for example. I'll just tune in, and this is just module 3 in our training. And I'm going to focus in on my right eye, and I'm just going to communicate. This is, we just talk to it. Everything's consciousness, mind to matter communication, if you like. So as I'm tapping into my right eye, I can access deep truths that are way beyond my conscious awareness and way beyond what you'd read in a book. So I'm just going to see what my eye would like to tell me. Okay, so what it's showing me is the right eye and the left eye play a very pivotal role in how we are to navigate our life. It's saying there's so much talk about being in the present, and present moment awareness is pivotal, but it's saying we need to elevate that understanding into not just let's just all be in the present. It's to be timeless, is to feel, be in the body in the present, but have an awareness of future events, of timeless events. Because to know in a moment the outcome of decisions, of beingness, of comments or conversations, that's enlightenment, that's powerful stuff. It's almost like to live in a multi-dimensional state where you're kind of perceiving, it's like one eye is perceiving the present, the right eye, and the left eye is perceiving the future. Now when I say perceiving the future, I don't mean, I'm thinking of doing this tomorrow and I'm thinking of doing that. That's not what the eye is referring to. The eye is talking about what is actually going to play out in the future. Now the time, a lot of people this is quite a challenging concept to grasp, but as we elevate in our awareness, we start accessing a different perception of time, so much so that we can see how things unfold, or the most likely case scenario, depending on what we're looking at. So the eye is saying to me, humanity needs to stop dwelling, in the past, but also to move a little bit out of the present because we need to see what are the results of our decisions. Like if we invent a combustion engine, where's that all going to take us? Or if we decide to neglect our relationship, where's that going to take us? And if I yell at my child, what's the outcome? Or send them to this school, what's the outcome? So it's saying we aren't meant to be in ignorance of the future. We're meant to harness the future and embrace it to make the best possible decisions. Because in accessing the future, there's some very valuable lessons that are there. We get to see why we should do things, why we should, and that creates growth. We don't all have to jump in front of a car to realize that it's going to hurt or it's going to kill us. Likewise, on more tame examples, we don't all have to yell at a friend or choose a particular job that's going to hurt us in the end, that we can actually make decisions that factor in future events. And in our UI teachings, we call that projections, or timeless viewing, however you like to, whatever captures the energy of it. So that was the information. That was the information in my right eye. And then it says, okay, well, let's go look in the left eye and see if the left eye wants to communicate any other wisdom or anything like that. Yeah, it's saying the trick with perceiving future outcomes is this investment in the outcome. And this is why it's an ability so few have, because we're almost, or we are conditioned, many of us, to want a particular future outcome. But it's saying it's not even that. It's saying we're conditioned to want a favorable future outcome. And you think about that statement, so yeah, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with wanting a favorable outcome? And it says that to do that creates a finite set of probabilities, because what we desire or term as favorable, well, might only be 1% of all the possible outcomes out there, when there are many outcomes that might not look favorable in that moment, but are the most favorable over the long term. And so our attachments to, I must have an immediate reward, immediate gratification in the situation, means we don't create a longer term gratification on a deeper level that's actually fulfilling. So the I is communicating, saying, that's where the wisdom is. The wisdom is kind of letting, just following where the truth is going to take us. You can never go wrong with where the truth leads us. You only go wrong when you're acting from non-truth. That's where things are going to get painful. But the truth can lead us in what appears as painful situations, but it's there, it's designed not to strip our health, which is what the non-truth will do, but it's designed to strip away the non-truths. So we've all gone through hardships and learnings, some of which, or most of which, we've come to recognize as very rewarding and leading us to more fulfilling situations. But some of us have also gone through hardships to not ever get out of them because we weren't acting from a space of truth. The decisions are still coming from a non-truthful space or self-doubt. So that was a very quick example on what we can access within the body. So that was just the right eye and the left eye. So when you start tapping into every aspect of the body, I was going to say you'll write a book, but it's not a book. You'll write a set of encyclopedias, because then you can tap into the fingernails, see what the fingernail wisdom within that is, the knee, the head, the brain, the heart, the kidneys, the liver. Every organ is carrying this frequency of information, and it desperately wants us to connect to that, and that's going to help us grow and evolve. And it reminds me of I had to make a little trip to the dentist yesterday. I had a filling that had fallen out from years ago, and I was sitting in the chair, and I was just in this space of, wow, this is almost dark ages. The procedure that's happening here, and the drills and the sounds, and I got a little bit in a darkened space, and I kind of went, all right, well, let's have a look at the truth. Let's get out of that space and look at the truth. And I was able to tap into the dentist's, what we call the higher consciousness, which is what we do at UI, or the UI, And I said, what's going on? Come on, really, is this necessary? We really have to go through this? And the answer was, it was like, until you guys learn to live more practically, whilst you all have holes in your life, you are going to have holes in your teeth. And that's as simple as it is. It's not going to change until you start repairing the non-truths in your life. So it was, again, if we looked at the teeth are an expression of our life situation, the quality of our life situation. You could literally tune into each tooth and there'd be a different set of wisdom. I wonder what the wisdom teeth would say. Well, I don't have them anymore, but that would be a nice experiment. So every part of the body is a source of answers. So then, where do we go from there? If we heighten, we're using more and more of our brain, what then becomes possible? So let's have a quick look there. Okay, so as we're mastering the physicality, we start allowing in another level of consciousness. And it's saying, all right, well, as you've mastered your physicality, that becomes a vessel to let in more information. So you're ready now to let in new ways of living. What does that mean? It means new ways of being in a family. It means new ways of having relationship, new ways of having sex, new ways of running a business, new ways of running politics. So right now, a big lesson for humanity is having self-awareness around their thoughts and self-awareness around their own health. But as we start evolving beyond that, the information that wants to come in, it's like health and awareness is, in many ways, you can kind of call it break even. It's very advanced for humanity, but that's kind of ground zero, if you like. But as we move beyond that, there's all these new instructions to come in on how best to navigate life. And it's just showing me a beautiful a beautiful example of that is when, and many of you have heard this story about when Sonia was first pregnant, that you go to an obstetrician or a GP or even most midwives and you say, look, I don't want to experience any pain. And they'll look at you and they'll say, well, you should have been on the pill. You shouldn't have gotten pregnant if you didn't want to experience pain during birthing. Well, that answer wasn't acceptable for Son, and she said, no, I'm going to get to the truth. So she tapped into universal intelligence. Now the intelligence, actually, which was my son in the womb, and she had a conversation with his consciousness, which is pure UI, pure intelligence, and said, what do I need to do to have a natural pain-free birth? And every day she would sit writing, channeling through word for word instructions on how to do it and how to avoid morning sickness and what was at the cause of that, or varicose veins or fatigue, how to heal the fear, clearing the beliefs and all this jazz. And she was given all the instructions. And so in that moment, she was allowing in a new level of information for humanity, because for most that's not common knowledge. So as we really clean up the basics within ourselves, UI starts saying, all right, well, you've cleaned up your bedroom. now I can really take you places. So it is so worthwhile to persist seeing through the non-truth, to allowing a greater access to our brain. Not only is it a huge gift to ourselves and what we will create in our own life, but it's a huge gift to our children. It's a huge gift to the planet, because obviously there's a lot we still need to learn. We're still very out of sync with the environment, or out of sync with each other. So there's still more to learn, and UI wants to give us the answers on how to run governments, on how to navigate war situations, on how to navigate climate change, and coming back to the very basics of how to run a very functional, supportive and nurturing family. So it's wanting to bring this information, and you guys are on this line, many of which, because UI is saying, I've chosen you to bring through this information, I've chosen you to bring that information in, and it's just going to take a little bit of patience, and most importantly, that self-love we've been referring to.